Welcome to Learning with UNP. In this session of Python for Data Science, we are going to understand about while loop. That includes what is a while loop and finally what are the use cases of while loop. Let's begin with understanding what is while loop. While loop in Python is used to repeatedly execute a block of code as long as given condition is true. It allows you to create loops where the number of iterations is not known in advance and the loop continues under the condition becomes false. A while loop is a control flow statement which repeatedly executes a block of code until the condition is satisfied and stops executing the block of code only if the condition fails. Here is the syntax of while loop. While condition include code block to be executed as long as the condition is true. The condition is any expression that evaluates to either true or false. The code block under the while statement is executed repeatedly as long as the condition is true. The condition is checked before each iteration. If the condition is initially false, the code block will not be executed at all. Now, let's look at the pseudocode representation of while loop. Step 1. Determine the condition that needs to be checked before each iteration. Means decide on a condition that must be true for the loop to continue executing. Step 2. Use the while keyword followed by the condition. Means start the loop with while followed by the condition. Step 3. Indent the block of code to be executed inside the while loop. Means indent the code that needs to be executed repeatedly inside the loop. Step 4. Ensure the condition can eventually become false to avoid an infinite loop. Means make sure that the condition can eventually become false to prevent an infinite loop. Step 5. Execute the Python script to see the block of code executed repeatedly until the condition is false. Means execute your Python script to see the code inside the loop executed repeatedly until the condition becomes false. As you can see on the screen, here is the working of while loop using a flowchart. The image is a flowchart that depicts the process of while loop. It starts with a start node, then goes to a condition node. If the condition is true, the flow goes to a statements node, and then back to the condition node. If the condition is false, the flow goes to an end node. This process continues until the condition becomes false. Here is an example demonstrating while loop. In this example, count is initialized to 5, indicating where to start counting down. The condition count greater than 0 checks if the count is greater than 0 before each iteration. The loop starts with the while count greater than 0, ensuring it continues as long as count is greater than 0. Inside the loop, printf count outputs the current value of count. Count minus equals to 1 decrements count by 1 in each iteration. As count decreases by 1 in each iteration, it eventually becomes 0, causing the condition count greater than 0 to become false, ending the loop. When we execute this Python script, it will print the values of count from 5 down to 1 per line. The same is explained here. Now, let's look at the use cases of while loop. While loop is commonly used in situations where you want to repeat an action until a specific condition is no longer true. Some of the common use cases of while loop are mentioned here. First use case is counting and accumulating. You can use a while loop to count or accumulate values until a specific condition is met. While loops are handy for counting or adding up values until a certain condition is satisfied. For example, you can sum elements in a list until you reach a target total. Second use case is input validation. While loops are useful for validating user inputs. You can keep asking or prompting the user for input until they provide valid or expected values or inputs. Third use case is game loops. In the game development, while loops are often used to create game loops that run continuously until the game ends or a specific condition triggers an exit. Fourth use case is repeating tasks. Any task that needs to be repeated until a certain condition is met can be handled with a while loop. This includes generating Fibonacci numbers, searching for specific elements in a list, and many more. An important point to be noted here is we need to be cautious while using while loops to avoid infinite loops. If the condition inside the loop never becomes false, the loop will keep running forever, causing your program to hang or crash. Always ensure that the condition eventually becomes false to avoid such scenarios. While loops can be powerful, so we need to be careful while working with while loops. Here are three examples demonstrating while loops. In the first example, count is set to 7, indicating where to start counting down, while count greater than 0 checks if count is greater than 0 before each iteration. As long as this condition is true, the loop will continue. Inside the loop, printf count outputs the current value of the count. Count minus equals to 1 decreases count by 1 in each iteration. With each iteration, count is decremented by 1, bringing it closer to 0. While count reaches 0, the condition count greater than 0 becomes false and the loop stops. Let's execute and check. As we discussed, the output is 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's move on to the second example. In second example, number is initialized to 1, indicating the starting point. Total sum is set to 0, where the sum of numbers will be accumulated. While number less than equal to 10 checks if the number is less than or equal to 10 before each iteration. The loop continues as long as this condition is true. Inside the loop, total sum plus equals to number adds the current value of the number to total sum. Number plus equals to 1 increments number by 1 in each iteration. With each iteration, number increases by 1, moving towards 10. When number exceeds 10, the condition number less than equals to 10 becomes false and the loop stops. After the loop finishes, it then prints the sum of the first 10 natural numbers. Let's execute and check the output. As we discussed, the output is sum of the first 10 natural numbers is 55. Finally, in the last example, user input is initialized to an empty string, indicating the starting point, while user input not equal to quit checks if the value of user input is not equal to quit before each iteration. The loop continues as long as this condition is true. Inside the loop, input enter a command prompts the user to enter a command. The user's input is stored in the variable user input. After receiving the input, print statement prints the command entered by the user. When the user enters quit, the condition user input not equal to quit become false and the loop stops. Let's execute it. Let's type go left, enter. Let's again type go right, enter. Now let's type quit and the program stopped. In this way, we can execute it. This is all about today's lecture. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.